Hello, this is Allspark Builds. Today we're going to be brewing Oberon Ale clone, 5 gallons worth, an all grain recipe. First step will be to add the water and get the bag ready. Now this is a electric brew pot. There's a false bottom. It's covering up a hot water heating element. That bottom comes out when I'm in the middle of brewing after I'm done with preparing the grains. To fill the pot up with water, I have a garden hose attached to my sink. Helps if the O-ring that's supposed to be in the fitting is actually in the fitting to prevent a water leak. That's where it's supposed to be. While it's filling, I'll put the brew bag in there, and I run some bungee cords through the handles to attach it so it doesn't fall into the pot. We have our 8 gallons of water to start with. The temperature controller set at 153 degrees, a pretty standard mash temperature for single infusion mash. It'll overshoot a little bit up to about 156, which is perfect for dough-in temperature. That'll be where we drop our grains in. While we're waiting for the water to get up to 153 degrees, I attached my circulation pump. It's a Steelhead 2.0 pump. You can get them at Northern Brewer. It's a little DC powered pump. I like to try it before I really need it because occasionally the rotor won't start. I'll have to take it apart and just barely touch the rotor, and then it'll free it up and I can put it back together and pump. I will try it. I have the valve most of the way closed off. The hose will come flying out of the pot if you have it turned up too much. But while the water's warming up, usually I'll brew in a bag recipes. You usually get a little bit less efficiency, so your original gravity won't be as high at the end. It's just one of the downsides of using a lot less equipment. So to make up for that, I generally ask for an extra pound of one of the malts just to balance it out a little bit. $1 of extra malt is way cheaper than all the other equipment, which might be $100 or $200 to get just a hair higher efficiency. We have reached strike temperature. Now we are going to dump our grains in. And we'll give it a quick stir. Make sure everything's wet. This setup has an exhaust vent, so I'm going to turn that on now to keep my basement smelling like brewing. Kind of crude, but it works. After dough in, our temperature has come down a couple degrees. Temperature controller will keep it right at 153, so we'll mark our time and let it sit there for an hour. I like to leave the pump running just to keep the water circulating. The circulating water helps keep the temperature even throughout the mash. We have finished our mashing process. Now it's time for mash out. With Brew in a Bag brewing, you don't technically need to mash out. Some people do, some people don't. I prefer to. So to mash out, I raise the temperature to 168 and I'll let it sit there for 10 minutes. And then it'll be time to pull the grains out. Now our mash out process is complete, so I'm gonna pull the grains out. I've got a hook mounted up on the ceiling that I'm gonna hang it from, and then that'll let the grains sit there and soak for a little bit or just drain out. And I'll also have to squeeze it to squeeze the extra liquid out. And now we crank it up to boil temperature. This Auber Instruments temperature controller, you can either run it in manual or you can run it in temperature control mode. So in manual, it's 0 to 100% power on the 5500 watt element. So to get it up to boil, I just set it to manual, which is hold down the left arrow and it'll go into H, and that means manual, and crank it up. So once you get to boiling, you can figure out how much water you're starting with, and you can calculate down how much water you want to lose to evaporation to get down to your target volume. I try and have about 5.5 gallons when I go to put the wort into the fermenter. I lose a little bit in the bottom of the pot and some of the trub in the bottom of the pot too. So 5.5 gallons works for me at the end. I think it's about 7.5 gallons remaining after mash out. So I want to boil off 2 gallons in the hour. And I think for this setup, it's about, I could be wrong, but it's about 87% to boil off 2 gallons in an hour. So I will start boiling. So while the pot is coming up to boil temperature, I've got 2 things to do. I need to fish out my false bottom from my brew kettle, and then I also need to squeeze the grains to get as much liquid out as possible. The water is boiling, so you definitely need some gloves on so you don't burn yourself. So we're coming up on boiling temperature, and when you first bring it up to boil, all the dissolved gases in the liquid come out, and it tends to want to bubble and boil over. So you gotta be ready to stir it to make sure it doesn't boil over. This concludes part 1 of Brew in the Bag Brewing electric style. Continue watching for the second half where I finish the brew. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe below for more videos. Thanks!